What is going on, guys? Welcome back. I know, later than expected, but a lot of stuff going on. However, still going to get you your recap. Chantel comes online, jokes she's going to eat healthy, but then says that she can't because all they have is eggs and toast. And keep that in mind because it's going to be important. She talks, as usual, about how ill she is, how she needs to pay bills, though, and come online. Again, keep that in mind for later. And she says that she needs to wait till sale day, which would be today or tomorrow when the vegetables go on sale. And she revisits those times she would get all of the fruit, all of the vegetables. Of course, Salah is asleep during all of this, and she says because he's self employed, he can, quote, do whatever he wants, and that he, quote, doesn't do much at all. She goes on to say that, again, he is a business partner, and that means he only has to, quote, go to meetings that aren't very formal. Of course, the chat brings up that he couldn't go to Thailand for a full month due to work, but now apparently he does very little and only has to go to these informal meetings. She, of course, says, we don't understand. That was all different. That month just happened to be the month where they were setting up this new shop. And then she goes on to say that she isn't sure what they're doing. What I don't understand is if you're telling me that he couldn't go because they were setting up this new shop, right? They were opening a new business, whatever the case may be. Would he have not known that in advance to maybe change the date of the trip? She goes on to say, if you're a business partner, all you do is collect money. And it's odd because, on one hand, she's made it seem like all he did is invest in the company. Okay. So, as an example, I've invested about $10,000 in Apple, right? I don't work for Apple, I collect dividends. That's almost where Chantal kind of wants to leave it at. But then she later goes on and says, well, he needs to be there to work. And this is kind of where she gets caught up in, I don't want to say lies, but at least inaccuracies. Because if you think about it on one aspect, they don't need him around, right? He's just a partner. He invested money. He's collecting the payments. But when it's convenient for her, right? When he's sleeping all day, when he can't go to Thailand, well, then, they need him around, right? He has to set up the shop. He has a driver. He has a company car. None of that makes sense. It's either one or the other. You either know the business or you don't know the business. She tries to go on and kind of cover this with, not everyone works a 9 to 5. Well, Chantal, not everyone has this illogical and irrational sleep till noon, play video games all day, and go to meetings from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m. on the weekends. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, however you want to discuss this. And of course, she tries to put a bow on everything with no one should care. No one should care because they aren't paying her bills. In reality, they are in part making sure her bills get paid by being in her chat. And it's not that people care, it's that she has said so much about this that people have questions, right? People want to inquire. Some of it doesn't make sense. Sometimes the story changes, and she gets irritated when asked about it. This, of course, turns into the couples channel, why it's not being utilized. So understand, just months ago, she was saying, oh, we're going to do couples content soon. We had to put a video up to keep the monetization active. We were getting low on the watch hour requirements. And again, we have these very strange contradictions, right? One moment, we're opening a merch store, right? We're telling people that we have to stream today because we're sick, even though we can't go without the income. We're going to come online and we're going to sniffle and pout and make it all about me. But we also have a channel that can still make money sitting dormant. She goes on to talk about the merch, right? And the profits and how she's not going to see them. Listen, Chantal, I doubt that you are going to see them right away, right? I had mentioned a lot of Teespring creators, myself included, were having months upon months of delays with our payments. Just so you have a little behind the scenes, you have to submit for a payout with Teespring before the 21st of the month, which means Chantal would likely have had to, before Sunday, requested a payout. And there is kind of a grace period of when people place an order to where you can actually collect the money to kind of prevent them from having to deal with a refund or a return. So the best case scenario, and I mean the best case scenario, is that Chantal read this, understood it, knew the exact date that she could submit, waited till the last day, which would have been the 20th, to submit for that, and then best case scenario, she's going to get paid the first week of May, while creators I've seen firsthand have tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars waiting. Don't know that's going to be the case. And of course, she goes on to say none of that matters. She doesn't need that money. because her husband provides for her and she makes, quote, decent money on YouTube. As I said, go back to the beginning. This is a very stark contrast from, quote, all I have is eggs and toast, and, quote, I'm waiting for sale day to get veggies. So Salah's providing, you make this decent money on YouTube, but all you have is eggs and toast. And don't get me wrong, I understand eggs are expensive, but you have to wait for vegetables to go on sale. She goes on to say it's not that big of a deal for her to own a house. She wants to live in a tiny house because all she needs is a kitchen and a TV. It's likely the most accurate thing I think she's ever said. And then she goes into this 3-year loan on the SUV, right? And personally, right, my speculation would be that Salah went with the shortest term possible so that it could be paid off by Chantal, in part, as quickly as it could be. Her concept is that to him, it is worth more if it's paid off in 3 years against, let's say 5 or 7. But it's just not reasonable. She acts as if the concept is that you go out and you buy a car, a truck, whatever the case may be, and then you pay it off as soon as you can so that you can sell it or trade it in with as much value as possible. Right? That would actually be the best way to lose money because cars, trucks, they are generally the investment we make that depreciates the most. So if you have a truck that, let's say you bought for $10,000, right? Whether you pay that off in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, the value of the truck really isn't going to change based on how long you've taken to pay it off. What will decrease it is, well, driving it rough, damaging it, not maintaining it. Those are all things we've seen Chantal do firsthand. So we're so concerned that we're overextending ourselves to pay this SUV off. But we're not concerned about taking care of it to maintain the value the same way. More on that in just a moment. She then goes on to flat out lie about the merch. Says she doesn't know how to change the price, demanding she has to have someone show her. I've shown you, Chantal. So is Teespring, right? You actually cannot list something without confirming the price. So again, how you are the exception to everything is beyond me. She goes on to talk about the blackouts, how she hopes they have less. Apparently they had 3 to 4 last year, even though I don't really recall her talking about it, much less going live. She talks about her cooking and says when she goes back to Canada, she needs to buy a lot of Western meds. Everyone adores her. Everyone tries to ruin her life. She jokes that people would never, quote, show up, and then the normal she doesn't care, she can always go back to Canada, that she would sit in grass and bees with nothing. Guess it depends what type of grass we're talking about, Chantal, but you offer that no one will take your happiness. Then I would ask you to revisit some of your rage streams. She then kind of mocks the fact that a lot of people, myself included, have talked about her running the stop signs. And she says, listen, no one's going to get kicked out for that. And she's absolutely correct. Right? She always has to go to the worst case scenario. I don't believe that she's going to get kicked out specifically for running stop signs. I believe that in part she could be reprimanded for having no regard for the laws, for not following the rules, and eventually it will cause an issue, whether she wants to admit that or not. She then, of course, moves on to her ex. And she does this by letting us know she never talks about him. But if she does, it's only to kind of further disgrace him. She says that she hasn't watched him in forever and that everyone needs to twist things to fit into narratives. And I'll be honest with you, Chantal, again, you're correct. People do in this community twist things, create narratives that aren't there. No one is immune from that. Okay? But if you look at the reality, you do talk about your ex a lot. If you can't see that, then I would offer maybe explore your own live streams, your own videos. Understand that in just passing, you mention him, right? Just days ago, you talked about his current partner getting sick after eating a Cobb salad simply because you saw a Cobb salad. So don't talk to us about, obsession or hate mobs. You look at food and you connect it to him, perhaps inadvertently, maybe just thinking out loud, but it doesn't change the fact that it happens. She then goes on to talk about how they're going to start looking poor. And it's because all of Salah's money is going towards bills, and any extra money she has left over goes to food. And this is something I've talked about. I've actually mentioned it in past videos that her surplus income is paying for these mukbangs. And if we look at the numbers, at one point that probably meant her investment in Taco Bell was being returned 5 to 8 times, right? But the reality is I'm not going to be the one that sits there and says, well, she's not making enough money to cover the food. She certainly is, but she's certainly not to the point where, she's 5 to 8 times. She's maybe struggling to double or triple the investment in the food to make the video. And at some point, you have to determine, from a health perspective, from a financial perspective, is this worth it? But I think Chantal will put her desires above anything else, even if it means, as we talked about before, spending more money than you have. Look at the situation she's got into. And speaking of that, she goes on to say the rest of her money goes to those debts, which Salah can't help pay because he has all the bills there and, quote, private things he needs to pay for. Is that the Red Room? I don't know. Right? All of this kind of snowballs, though, into how she could sponsor Salah to Canada because she doesn't have an uncharged bankruptcy, which she says is going to be over very soon. There's something going on here because she's going back and forth with this, right? One day he would never want to go to Canada. The next day he does want to go. He hasn't went. And then you think about, the details of what she's saying, right? She's clearly talking about when and what needs to happen regarding her bankruptcy for him to go. And when you tie this all together, okay, we're going to be living broke. I have to pay all my debts. And then you add in, we're paying off the SUV as soon as possible so we can sell it for top dollar. And oh, by the way, the timelines of those things just happen to align. It just seems strange. Of course, during this, she tells everyone the government won't care about Salah coming to Canada, regardless of what Girl World thinks. All they care about is, is she going to have the money to support him? Does he have any record to deal with? She talks about what she misses in Canada, which essentially boils down to her family, medical care, and pizza. She kind of revisits when she was there in December, how she missed Salah so much she had to come back. She says that, even if she did go back to Canada alone and took off her hijab, things would never go back to the way they were. In part, they can't, Chantal. You don't have the disposable income to do those things. And for your health, it's probably declined so much, I don't know that you physically can. And this, of course, is during the time she starts kind of laughing hysterically. She said she's going to pass out, and then she soils herself. Or as Salah likes to apparently call it, the shat signal. She admits that she can't drive like this. She kind of cites her blood sugar as irregular. It makes her dizzy. She says it goes between 8 and 20. And of course, after the incident, she promptly logs off the stream after giving birth to her, quote, food baby. Though, I'm going to leave you with the top comments from the last video. I appreciate each and every one of you, more so when the video is a day late. But when Chantal was doing the same antics just earlier this morning, there's no way I cannot be back as soon as I can with more commentary.